Olá, sejam todas e todos bem-vindos a mais uma edição da série Conversa com Autores, da Stanford Social Innovation Review Brasil, a CIR Brasil. Eu sou Carolina de Assis, sou editora-chefe da CIR Brasil, e hoje tenho a alegria de mediar este encontro entre Tina Ambos e Alessandra França. Tina Ambos é professora de Gestão Internacional e diretora do Centro de Inovação e Parcerias da Escola de Economia e Gestão da Universidade de Genebra, na Suíça, e ela é uma das autoras do artigo Transformação contínua para apoiar MPMEs na América Latina, que nós publicamos na 12ª edição da CIR Brasil. O texto conta a história da Fundação para o Desenvolvimento Sustentável, a Fundes, que foi criada no Paraná e há 40 anos promove o desenvolvimento econômico sustentável em diversos países da América Latina, por meio do financiamento de educação e apoio a micro, pequenas e médias empresas, as MPMEs. E a Alessandra França é fundadora e presidente do Banco Pérola, uma associação que atua desde 2009 para democratizar o acesso ao crédito no Brasil. O Banco Pérola tem como foco o microcrédito produtivo para empreendedores, sobretudo das classes C, D e E também oferece educação financeira para que esses empreendedores invistam de forma estratégica nos seus negócios. A nossa conversa vai ser em inglês, com legendas em português. Então, muito bem-vinda, Alessandra, and welcome, Tina. Thank you both for being here with us today. I would like to start with what brought us together, the article titled Continuous Transformation to Serve the Mission, which you, Tina, co-wrote with Alexander Zimmermann and Sebastian Fuchs, about Fundes, the Foundation for Sustainable Development. So can you tell us, how did you first learn about Fundes and what led you to take a close look at its trajectory and write this case study?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Carolina. It's a real pleasure. Well, hello and welcome to all of our audience. I'm very honored to speak on behalf of my co-authors here, but also on behalf of Fundes. That really is a fascinating story. My research as a professor of international management really centers on how innovations can actually create more social impact. So how organizations can create social impact as their core business, not just as a side activity, and what different form that takes. And in that sense, Fundes has been an amazing story, an amazing case to study. I was introduced to the then CEO of Fundes, Uli Frey, about 10 years ago. And at first I was really impressed by their way of creating shared values. So really trying to plug small and medium enterprises into the value chains of big multinationals. And since then, Fundes, as you'll read in the case, hopefully, has transformed and really gone through a very interesting journey that we'll share with you later on. And we've worked very closely with Fundes over the years by writing teaching case studies, by working with our student groups, working with executives together. And we've never actually had a kind of full story of how Fundes developed from its initiation to the Fundes it has become today, which is really a social venture incubator that is scaling quite a bit. And we're very proud to have this case now published in Stanford Social Innovation Review. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And excellent. We're going to go then now to Alessandra. And Alessandra, it would be great if you could tell us the story of Banco Pérola. What is it and what does it do? How did it come about and what motivated you to create it?
Okay. Banco Pérola was born in 2009, inspired by 3 key moments in my life. First, my parents' story. They were micro-entrepreneurs who constantly struggled to access credit. And my personal experience too. I grew up in the underprivileged community, so I received a scholarship to study and work on social projects. The name of this project is Projeto Pérola. Banco Pérola name is in honor to Projeto Pérola. And at 24 years old, I participated in a business plan competition and received the first financial investment and strategic support to bring Pérola to life. Today, after many lessons learned, Banco Pérola is one credit association, a no-profit organization operating digitally across Brazil, Our mission is to support micro-entrepreneurs by providing both credit and the training to help them grow safely and independently too.
Perfect. Thank you, Alessandra. So now I'll leave the floor to you two so you can have a conversation. And Alessandra, would you like to start with a question for Tina?
Of course. Tina, in the article and based on my own research, I noticed the fund's work doesn't mention Brazil very often. And given that is largest economy in Latin America, Brazil, what challenges did the funds face in entering the Brazilian market for you?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alessandra. And I mean, we're going to speak more about your venture afterwards, but I have to say I was truly impressed by your personal story and everything that you built over the years here. So congratulations already. And yeah, looking forward to asking my questions on that in a minute. Thanks for reading the case so carefully. You were right that Brazil is not mentioned prominently. It is because Fundes is operating in Brazil only with partners. What are the main reasons? You can probably guess, and also the challenges that there's, of course, language and also other cultural barriers between other Latin American countries and Brazil. So Brazil, I don't have to tell you, you know this much better than I do, is a huge, very diverse economy, which I think often has stronger ties to, to Europe, for example, than to other Latin American countries. And the Fundes model really works on this kind of deep local knowledge, where, of course, knowing the market, speaking the language is so important to them, right? So in Brazil, they have more followed a model where they actually go in when they have partners or when their specific clients are seeking to scale models from other countries to the Brazilian market. One example is they worked, for example, with Pepsi for quite some time. There's a project in Brazil that has been finished 2 years ago. And also more specifically, they're working with Atlas, a solar energy company. And there the model was also that they're also present in Mexico and in Chile. And then, Brazil was also one of the markets. Another factor is, I think, very specific for Brazil, which impacts Fundes, is that Brazil has quite an established social venturing and venture capital market already, as opposed to, I don't know, we want to be too general, but many of the other Latin American countries. So I think in Brazil, there were already some, similar, if not competing models to what Fundes could offer. So they always saw more potential in the other countries. But of course, they're very, eager to expand their presence in Brazil and maybe also showcasing the work and finding new partners is what this conversation between us can actually bring.
Okay. My second question is about the examples, the working funds in Brazil. So, Tina, you can explain more about success and mistakes, this approach, the funds, specifically in Brazil?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think at the key of what Fundes does is they connect the micro and small enterprises, the so-called MPMEs, to the large companies. And the way of doing it is not by donations, by CSR, social responsibility activities, but they really want to integrate the small companies into the supply chains of the bigger companies. This is what has always driven their concept, and this is what they really believe in, because it's more than like a one-off investment, a one-off donation, a one-off project, but something that sustainably creates value for both sides of the company. So for the small companies, as well as for the larger companies. The other element is, of course, for the small companies that as a micro enterprise, and you know this very well, you can only kind of be empowered if there's a network of like-minded other micro and small enterprises where you can learn from, that you can relate to, where you can have a common project that actually allows you to scale. And that becomes even more prominent, of course, in the time of technology where everything is on an app, on a platform. So this idea of scaling and of joining forces with other companies has become ever more important. So I think as a success factor really is the collaboration with Pepsi that I already mentioned. And that was only discontinued because Pepsi then shifted their structure in Latin America. I think the example where they work with Atlas, with solar energy in Mexico, Chile, and Brazil, they try to replicate the project across countries. And I think this is also where Fundus is particular, that they are trying to actually harness the potential of one project across different countries. And of course, countries are very different, but when you look at industries, sometimes industries are not so different across countries. So really going deep into, what supply chain are we looking at? Are we looking at metals? Are we looking at banana farmers? Are we looking at alpacas, right? So they're very different industries. And sometimes, even though the context is very diverse, there are synergies across industries and across certain countries where you can actually get a foothold.
Thank you so much, Tina. For me, it's a pleasure to speak with you today.
Tina, feel free to ask your questions to Alessandra.
Yes, absolutely. So, thank you so much, Alessandra. What I already said before, it's so impressive what you have achieved with Banco Perla. Could you elaborate a little bit on how you balance the commercial side, which a bank has to have, with the social impact that you create? Particularly, I'm curious to see what is the pathway from financing to generating impact. So you invest in education, you support communities, or even funding on founding companies. So what is this pathway, and how have you actually implemented that?
Okay, well, it's a big challenge for us. My focus has always been crediting, but we have learned that credit alone is not enough. That's why we will also invest in financial and entrepreneurial education, for example, and community initiatives such as solar energy and access to clean water, to balance the commercial side with the social impacts come from the vision that credit secures sustainability and scale. And education initiatives in community projects expand the social transformation. The transition from financial to impact should be gradual for us, learning from each step, remain open to change, and keeping the entrepreneur ever at the center.
Yeah, I think this very much resonates with what my colleagues at Fundus actually tell me. And you already mentioned an important buzzword, that is the scaling. And particularly in a country like Brazil, that is so large and so diverse, and local knowledge is so important. So how do you actually see the role of technology in scaling and in reaching more people? We get very different messages here, right? Some say technology is an integrator, and once we have technology, we can reach everyone and no divides anymore. Or there's another camp that says, well, technology could be a divider, right? Because now, for example, a Spanish app versus a Portuguese app does not work. So is technology really an integrator or a divider for you when you speak about scaling?
Okay. Brazil is a vast and diverse country, and technology plays a crucial role in reaching remote areas. It's only one example of this. The main challenge is designing credit assessment methodology, because Brazil is very diverse, that take account ever the specific reality of each region and working with local partners. And local partners is very important too, because they have two supports for us. For example, to digital literacy is one important point. In this sense, technology acts as an integrator. For us, is one integrator, because connecting people, expanding impact, and qualify scale without losing the human and local perspective. For us, is this form, Tina?
Yeah. No, this is fantastic. If I may have a follow-up question for you. Do you have any ambitions also to scale beyond Brazil? Brazil itself is already very huge, but is there also, potential for you to develop this model in other markets?
Today, Brazil is a big challenge for us because it's vast and diverse. And Perla works with social and digital platform. And for now, Brazil is a big challenge for us, Tina. I don't have today any plans for expanding for Latin America, for example. Today, not, but why not in the future?
Yeah, because sometimes, sometimes some regions in other countries are closer to some regions in Brazil than two regions in Brazil, like the North and South might be, right? Because sometimes, national boundaries are not kind of more of an inhibitor to scaling than the local knowledge and the context. But of course, Brazil has a very specific position in Latin America, so it's
In the early stage, the Banco Pérola, my work stay in only 3 cities, and today my work stay in all the country. Is a big dream for me. And the most big dream to expand the other countries in Latin America, of course. I have time. I pray I have more time in life, and why not in the future?
I mean, that's amazing. I'm sitting in Switzerland today, and Switzerland is smaller than most of the Brazilian cities. So, no way to talk about scaling. But I think it's amazing what you have achieved, and I think it's also very important to have a mission in mind in terms of, this is how far I want to go, or this is the type of people, the type of entrepreneurs I want to reach. This is also something that was very key for Fundes, right? Because they also at some point, they even were able to have projects in Africa, for example, where they could replicate. But then they said very consciously, we want to be for Latin America because this is what we know. This is where we have the relationships with the people. We have the local knowledge. We can actually build on our networks, and we do not want to grow further than this, right? So sometimes limiting growth is also an important part of the strategy.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Tina and Alessandra. And great follow-up question, Tina, because as you mentioned, like the diversity of Brazil, right? Like the regions. And I have a question for you precisely about that. Since economic opportunities in Brazil, they are still highly uneven. Micro and small enterprises in the North and the Northeast face many more barriers than those in the South and in the Southeast, as Alessandra, I'm sure, knows very well. So for you, Tina, what insights from Fundes work across diverse Latin American contexts could help guide policies or practices to reduce regional inequalities for most small businesses here in Brazil?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question. And obviously, I'm not an expert on Brazil, but I'll try to share what I've learned, in my work across the world in, difficult, harsh conditions, harsh economic conditions. I think there's several best practices which we could elevate from Fundes. I think the first one is that Fundes has always been about building and leveraging these networks of micro and small enterprises. And Alessandra also pointed to the importance of education, of knowledge, of empowering the entrepreneurs. So enabling them to be stronger together. And with this idea, it's not a one-off, it's a long-term relationship, it's about the learning. So most recently, Fundes has launched Fundamental, which is a social venture incubator in a way, right? So they've really changed their model from a consulting model to building new ventures, which is an independent avenue of creating impact, right? So basically, when the financing ends, how can we make sure that those companies, last and that their success actually lasts? And I think this is maybe one format that can help also connect different communities, right? Because if there's communities of entrepreneurs, say in the South, that have built a network, for example, one of Fundes's projects, there's a startup called Simon, which is a software service platform that allows large companies to train micro entrepreneurs in the value chain with like TikTok-like video formats, right? So this is like independent of the context. So if that works with a group of entrepreneurs in the South, maybe it can also empower others, right? So there's some projects that can plug and play, others can't, right? So you have to very specifically identify the needs and the pain points. And this is also something that is unique to Fundes, that they've always had an eye on these are the pain points, right? Understanding the local problems. And I think this is probably the answer to every diversity in the region in terms of what is it really that people are struggling with, right? Is it the access to capital? Is it the access to knowledge? Is it finding a partner that services items, or is it finding groups of consumers, or is it kind of infrastructure challenges? So finding those very pain points and trying to answer this question. The second element of Fundes is really that they always had their eye on scaling, right? So this is the network of entrepreneurs, but this is also across regions or even countries. So sometimes they collaborate with partners like the Atlas case I just mentioned before, and these partners, often the big multinationals that want them to be in several countries. But sometimes you can do this bottom up and search for those comparable specific conditions across industries, right? For example, if you work with small beauty salons, as they did in Mexico, you can find beauty salons almost everywhere, right? So what is the commonality? What are the same challenges that you're facing? And last but not least, Fundes always had this very clear focus on its mission. If it's not for the benefit of micro and small enterprises, it won't happen within Fundes. And they've transformed a lot in their organization, and they've transformed a lot in terms of how they create social value, but they're not questioning that mission. And I think this is also something that any organization that cares about social impact can learn from, to stick to the mission, but then to be able to transform the model, how it is delivered. Fundes work transformed from a philanthropic organization to a shared value consultancy to a social venture accelerator and incubator. So these are very different formats, but they always stay true to the mission, and they always kept the network of micro and small enterprises they're actually working with.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. And now, Alessandra, drawing from what Tina and her co-authors shared in their article, and for your experience, right? So we know that Fundes works at a regional scale, while Banco Pérola focuses on entrepreneurs in Brazil. And of course, as we said, Brazil is a whole continent practically, but still Pérola is very much a community-rooted institution, right? Like as you told us your story. So what do you think that these types of institutions like Pérola can teach larger regional organizations working across various countries, such as Fundes? And also, what do you think that Pérola can learn from Fundes, for example, from these types of institutions?
Okay, Carolina. Pérola can support funds by sharing its practical experience in provide credit and empowering micro entrepreneurs in Brazil, because it's a large country, it's a continent, like you say now. In return, funds can help Pérola with its regional networking or Latin America experience, and opportunity to expand our impact is a possibility. Why not?
Definitely, yes. So, okay, so as per your closing, like to wrap up now, I'd like to ask each of you to share the main lessons you've learned, Tina, from your research on Fundes and beyond, and also Alessandra from your work at Banco Pérola and your relationships in this environment with the small businesses. So what can you share with us about what have you learned from what small businesses really need in order to thrive?
Should I go first? Well, I think it's really about empowering small enterprises to build their own business case, right? So there needs to be a clear pathway from finance, knowledge, building networks to impact. And I think the other thing that we haven't mentioned at the moment, and something that I learned a lot from Fundes, but also I learned from the conversation with Alessandra today, is there is always obviously humans behind it, right? And there's always a story that motivates you to make an impact, right? And I think this story and these people that are leading organizations are the ones who empower and who actually guide entrepreneurs all the way, right? Even personal new engagement, but also through the mission and through building an organization that has a specific culture and that it prioritizes certain values. And I think if it's not for these people, that are always facing, bottlenecks, that are always, there is capital is going to be cut, you face a structure, legislation is changing. So we constantly have to reinvent what we do in our work, but it's about the people that lead and inspire that more than anything. And so I think the Fundus team has been amazing in terms of transforming over, several decades now in very different ways. They're still delivering on the mission. And I mean, I see the same with Alessandra and her ambitious model, that she really inspires, her own story into the work she does. And I'm very sure it's going to be successful and continue successfully. Thank you.
Okay, for Banco Pérola and for me, over the past 50 years, Pérola has constantly reinvented itself. It's a journey similar to funds. I divided these 50 years in 3 important moments and lessons too, for me and for the organization. 2009 until 2013, we survived on donation and awards, which is not enough. In 2014, we created our first fund connecting entrepreneur to investor, professionalizing the organization to meet regulatory and investor requirements. Was a big challenge for us. Pandemic 2022, we accelerated digitalization, expanded from only 3 cities to all the country. And today, we are consolidating a regulated funds model, blended finance, that combine financial sustainability with social impact. And so for us, our key lesson is very importance of stay open ever to change and adaptation, as Fund has done, and continue to expand the impact. For me, is the most important lesson is this.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alessandra. Thank you both very much for joining us today and sharing so many valuable insights. I hope you too, Tina and Alessandra, have enjoyed this conversation. And I also hope that we can continue to learn from your experiences in the pages of Stanford Social Innovation Review Brazil. We'd be happy to keep counting on you to share your knowledge with us. And thank you to everyone who has been with us. See you next time. Bye.